What happens when a stand-up legend who built his career on saying exactly what he thinks sits across from one of daytime TV's most outspoken voices, and neither one is interested in backing down? Make sure to subscribe to Final Take Files, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. So here's how it unfolded. The audience is already buzzing before he walks out. When Chris Rock steps onto the stage, the applause is loud, standing ovation loud. He smiles, waves, gives a quick hug around the table, and sits down like he knows exactly where this could go. Joy Behar jumps in first. Chris Rock is here. You're on tour again, another special, still stirring the pot. Chris grins. I don't stir the pot. I just point out what's already boiling. Audience laughter. Joy tilts her head. Some people would say you turn the heat up. He shrugs. Some people say everything. Another host tries to keep it light. Do you feel audiences are different now? More sensitive. Chris doesn't hesitate. Audiences are fine. Twitter's sensitive. Big applause. Joy responds quickly. Social media reflects real people. And a lot of real people think some comedy punches down. There's a shift. The laughter fades into attentive silence. Chris leans back slightly. Who decides what's down? Joy answers immediately. You know what I mean. Marginalized groups. Communities that already deal with enough. Chris nods slowly. Everybody thinks they're marginalized now. Some laughs. Some murmurs. Joy smiles, but it's tighter now. That's dismissive. No, Chris says calmly. It's observational. Audience reacts, a mix of claps and quiet sounds. Joy continues, there's a responsibility when you have a platform. Chris points lightly toward the table. You have a platform. We're having discussions, Joy says. So am I, he replies. Mine just have punchlines. The crowd reacts loudly. One of the co-hosts jumps in. Okay, but seriously, do you think there's anything off-limits anymore? Chris pauses. Intent matters. If the intent is to hurt, that's not comedy. If the intent is to expose something ridiculous, that's the job. Joy presses. And who decides your intent? The audience, he answers. They don't represent everyone, Joy shoots back. Neither does Twitter, Chris says smoothly. Applause. Joy leans forward. When communities say they're tired of being the punchline, that's not just Twitter. Chris nods. Then maybe the joke isn't about them. The audience lets out a louder reaction. Half applause, half tension. Joy doesn't back off. But if they feel it is. Feeling something doesn't automatically make it true, Chris cuts in, still calm. There's an audible gasp from somewhere in the audience. Another host tries to soften the moment. Okay, this is getting deep. Joy looks directly at him. You're saying feelings don't matter? I'm saying feelings don't control art, Chris replies. That lands heavy. Joy folds her hands. Art doesn't exist in a vacuum. And outrage doesn't either, he says. The applause is louder now, more divided. You can feel the room split. Joy shifts slightly in her chair. Some would argue comedians hide behind, it's just a joke, when they're criticized. Chris smiles. And some would argue talk shows hide behind, it's just a conversation. The audience erupts, louder than anything so far. Joy's smile stays on, but her eyes narrow just a bit. So you think we're the same? We both sit at a table and talk about serious issues, Chris replies. Only difference is I admit I'm trying to make people laugh. Another wave of reactions. One host laughs nervously. He came ready today. Chris raises his hands. I'm relaxed. I'm having fun. Joy nods slowly. So are we. But the tone says otherwise. The energy at the table has changed. What started as a promo interview is now a real debate. Sharp, personal, layered. And you can tell this conversation is just getting started. The audience is still buzzing from that last exchange. You can feel it, that low hum in the room when people realize this isn't a typical promotional stop anymore. Joy adjusts her cards but doesn't look down at them. Chris, nobody's saying you can't joke. The question is accountability. Chris nods slowly. Accountability for what? Telling a joke people don't like. For contributing to narratives, Joy replies quickly. For normalizing certain attitudes. He leans forward slightly. You think a joke normalizes hate? I think repeated messaging can, she says. He smiles, but it's sharper now. So when this table repeats something every day, is that messaging? The audience reacts again, louder claps from one side, quiet murmurs from another. One of the co-hosts jumps in. Let's not make this about us. Chris shrugs. I'm not. I'm saying everybody influences people. Comedians just get blamed faster. Joy crosses her legs, settling in. Because comedians hide behind humor. And politicians hide behind speeches, Chris shoots back. News hides behind sources. Everybody's got a shield. There's a ripple through the crowd. Joy tilts her head. You're comparing yourself to politicians now? I'm comparing platforms, he corrects calmly. Not power. Another host tries to pivot. Let's talk about your latest special. You touched on culture wars, identity politics. Chris interrupts gently. Because that's what people are talking about at home. I didn't invent it. Joy nods. But you amplify it. So do you, he says, without missing a beat. The audience lets out another collective, oh. Joy doesn't flinch. We challenge things here. Chris smiles. So do I. She leans forward. By making fun of them? Sometimes making fun of something shows how ridiculous it is, he answers. Humor exposes hypocrisy faster than a panel discussion. That one gets a strong reaction, applause mixed with nervous laughter. Joy responds, or it oversimplifies complex issues. Everything on TV oversimplifies complex issues, Chris says plainly. A few people in the audience clap immediately. One host laughs awkwardly. Okay, we're still friends here. Chris chuckles. I'm cool. I like Joy. Joy smiles thinly. I like you too. I just disagree with you. That's allowed, he says. Of course it's allowed, she replies. We're not canceling you. That word lands heavy. Chris raises an eyebrow. Nobody cancels me. They just tweet. Audience laughter and applause. Joy shakes her head. Cancel culture is exaggerated. Is it? Chris asks calmly. Tell that to people who lose jobs over jokes. Joy responds quickly. There's usually more to the story. Sometimes, he says. Sometimes not. The energy tightens again. Another host jumps in. Do you think comics are more afraid now? Chris nods. Some are. Because the loudest reaction isn't in the room anymore. It's online. Joy counters, public criticism isn't new. True, Chris says. But public outrage with a screenshot lasts forever. The audience murmurs in agreement. Joy gestures with her hand. So what's the solution? Say whatever you want and nobody responds. I didn't say that, he replies. People can respond. I just don't think they get to decide what art is allowed. Joy's voice sharpens slightly. But society always decides that. He shakes his head. Society reacts. Artists create. That line gets a strong applause break. Joy waits it out, then says, It sounds like you're saying comedians are above criticism. Chris laughs softly. No. I'm saying criticism isn't control. There's a quiet pause. Joy studies him. You've never regretted a joke? Chris thinks for a moment. Sure. Timing. Delivery. Maybe it wasn't funny enough. Not content, she presses. He pauses again. If it wasn't funny, that's the crime. The audience laughs loudly at that. Joy shakes her head. You really believe that? I do, he says plainly. Comedy is about tension. If there's no tension, there's no joke. Another host nods slowly. That's interesting. Joy responds, but tension for who? You're not the one living certain realities. Chris leans back. I live reality too. She nods. Of course. But privilege plays a role. The word privilege shifts the energy again. Chris doesn't react emotionally. Everybody's got some privilege. Joy replies, not equally. True, he says. But that doesn't mean only certain people get to joke. The audience reacts with a mix of applause and silence. Joy's tone softens just slightly. No one's saying only certain people get to joke. It feels like that sometimes, he responds. She looks surprised. You? Feeling restricted. He shrugs. When people say, you can't joke about this, you can't joke about that, eventually you're just telling knock-knock jokes. The audience laughs. Joy smirks. Maybe knock-knock jokes would be safer. Chris grins. Safe isn't funny. Big applause. Joy exhales through her nose, almost laughing. You thrive on controversy. I thrive on honesty, he says. And you're always right, she challenges. No, he answers calmly. But I'm always joking. Another ripple through the room. Joy points gently toward him. But some of your jokes don't sound like jokes to people. Chris nods. That's because comedy doesn't come with a warning label. The audience reacts again. One of the co-hosts interjects. Okay, let me ask this. Do you think there's a difference between punching up and punching down? Chris turns toward her. I think that's a lazy framework. Joy immediately responds, lazy. Yeah, he says. Because who's up depends on who you ask. The audience murmurs again. Joy folds her arms loosely. Power structures exist. Of course, he agrees. And power should be mocked. She nods. So then we agree. Yeah, he says. But power isn't always who Twitter says it is. That gets another strong reaction. Joy glances toward the audience, then back at him. You keep bringing up Twitter. Because that's where the outrage lives, he replies. No, she says firmly. Outrage lives in real communities. Chris looks at her steadily. And laughter lives in real communities too. That line gets a noticeable applause break. The conversation has stopped being playful. It's controlled, but it's direct now. Joy sits upright. So if someone tells you a joke hurt them, what do you say? Chris answers without hesitation. I'm sorry it hurt you. But I'm not sorry I told it. There's a collective reaction, louder than anything since he sat down. Joy blinks. That's bold. It's honest, he says. Silence hangs for a second longer than daytime TV usually allows. You can see the producers probably signaling for a break soon. The tension is high, but it's not explosive, it's measured, pointed. Joy straightens her papers. We're going to take a quick break. Chris smiles. See? That's control. The audience laughs loudly as the music starts to swell. And as the cameras fade toward commercial, you can feel it. This conversation is far from over. When the show comes back from break, the applause is loud but uneven. Some people are clapping hard, others are watching closely, waiting. The energy feels different now. Less playful. More personal. Joy smiles at the camera. We're back with Chris Rock. Before the break, we were talking about comedy, accountability, and who gets to decide what crosses a line. Chris nods calmly. Light stuff for daytime. The audience laughs, tension easing just slightly. One of the co-hosts jumps in quickly. Chris, I want to ask you something specific. When you say, the audience decides, what about the people who aren't in the room? The ones who see clips later and feel targeted. Chris leans forward. That's part of the risk of performing. Not everyone hears the setup. Not everyone hears the context. Joy responds immediately. But that's the reality now. Everything is clipped. Then maybe we need longer attention spans, Chris says. A few audience members clap. Joy shakes her head. That's not realistic. Neither is pretending jokes are policy, he replies. There's another wave of reaction. Joy turns toward him fully now. Nobody thinks jokes are policy. But culture shapes policy. Chris nods. And culture includes comedy. Exactly, she says quickly. So why treat it like it's separate from free expression, he asks. Joy's tone sharpens. Free expression doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Chris doesn't blink. Consequences like what? Criticism. Losing support. Sponsors walking away, she answers. He shrugs slightly. That's business. That's not morality. The audience murmurs. Joy tilts her head. So you separate the two? I separate feelings from rules, he says. You can feel however you want. But once you start saying, this shouldn't exist, that's different. One of the co-hosts steps in. Do you think that's actually happening? Things not being allowed to exist. Chris nods slowly. You see it all the time. Colleges canceling speakers. Shows getting pulled. People getting labeled for one joke. Joy counters, sometimes those decisions are about patterns, not one joke. Sometimes, he agrees. But sometimes it's just pressure. The audience is quieter now, listening carefully. Joy folds her hands. You sound frustrated. Chris exhales lightly. I'm not frustrated. I'm just honest about it. Comedy used to be the place you went to release tension. Now it's where people go to monitor it. There's a noticeable reaction to that. Joy responds, or maybe people just want to feel respected. Chris nods. Respect is important. Then why not adjust, she asks. He looks at her steadily. Adjust to what? To evolving standards, she says. He pauses. Who sets them? There's a beat. Joy answers carefully. Society. Chris gives a small smile. Society's not a person. It's a mood. The audience laughs louder than they have in a few minutes. Joy tries not to smile but does. That's clever, but it's also dismissive. It's not dismissive, he replies. It's realistic. Moods change. What's offensive today might not be tomorrow. And what if it should be offensive? Joy pushes. Then don't laugh, he says plainly. Applause. Joy leans in. That's too simple. Sometimes simple is correct, he responds. Another host steps in, sensing the temperature rising again. Let me ask this. Do you think there's a generational divide happening here? Chris nods immediately. Of course. Joy raises an eyebrow. You think this is just young people being sensitive? No, he says firmly. I think young people are loud. Every generation thinks they discovered morality. The audience laughs, some clapping harder. Joy smiles slightly. And your generation didn't? Oh, we did, he says. We just didn't have Wi-Fi. Big laugh from the crowd. Joy shakes her head. It's not just noise. It's progress. Some of it is, Chris agrees. Some of it is fear of being attacked online. The word attacked makes the room quiet again. Joy responds carefully. Online harassment is real. So is mob mentality, Chris says. A mixed reaction follows. Joy studies him. Do you think you've ever benefited from that same mob energy? When audiences rally behind you? Chris nods. Sure. Audiences support people they like. So it cuts both ways, she says. Exactly, he replies. Which is why I don't panic when it swings. Joy presses again. But what about the people who don't have your platform? Who can't weather that swing? Chris's tone softens slightly. That's tough. I get that. Then shouldn't people with platforms be more careful? She asks. He pauses longer this time. Careful about what? About reinforcing stereotypes. About making people feel smaller, Joy says. Chris answers evenly. Comedy points at stereotypes to show how ridiculous they are. Joy counters, or it repeats them. That depends on whether you trust the audience, he says. The audience reacts again, louder applause from one side. Joy gestures toward them. You keep pointing to the audience like they're the final judge. They are, he says. We are too, she replies firmly. That line hangs in the air. Chris looks at her. As commentators, not gatekeepers. The crowd reacts sharply, That one hit. Joy's smile fades just slightly. Nobody here is trying to gatekeep. Good, he says calmly. Then let comedians cook. Laughter breaks the tension for a second. Joy sighs, almost amused. You really think it's that simple? I think life's complicated, he says. That's why we joke about it. There's a quieter moment now. Less combative. More reflective. Joy speaks slower. You know, some people watching this right now probably feel unheard. Chris nods. And some probably feel relieved. The audience reacts, soft applause building into something stronger. Joy glances toward the camera briefly, then back at him. So where does that leave us? Chris shrugs lightly. Talking. There's a small laugh from the crowd. Joy leans back in her chair, taking that in. You don't think there's ever a point where you say, maybe I won't go there? Chris considers it. Sure. If it's not funny. Joy exhales again. Always comes back to funny. That's the job, he says. The tension hasn't disappeared, it's just settled into something heavier now. Less explosive, more ideological. And you can feel the show building toward something bigger. One more push before it all wraps up. The energy in the room feels settled, but not resolved. You can tell everyone at the table knows this conversation is going to follow them off the stage. Joy looks toward the camera again. We've covered a lot. Comedy, culture, consequences. Chris nods. We solved everything. The audience laughs, lighter this time. The tension isn't gone, but it's less sharp. One of the co-hosts jumps in. Let me ask you something personal. After everything you've been through publicly the last few years, has your perspective changed at all? The room quiets again. Chris answers calmly. My perspective changes all the time. That's part of growing. But I'm still a comedian. I'm still going to look at life and find what's absurd. Joy responds more softly now. Even when it's painful? Especially when it's painful, he says. A few audience members clap gently. Joy nods slowly. I think where we disagree is not about comedy existing. It's about impact. Chris leans back. Impact matters. I'm not saying it doesn't. Then we agree on something, she says. We probably agree on more than people think, he replies. There's a noticeable shift, less combative, more grounded. Joy smiles slightly. I just think there's a responsibility that comes with influence. And I think there's a responsibility that comes with commentary, he responds. The audience reacts again, but this time it feels less divided and more engaged. Joy takes that in. Fair. There's a brief pause. Another host laughs lightly. Well, this definitely wasn't a boring segment. Chris grins. I don't do boring. The crowd laughs. Joy looks at him one more time. I'll say this, you don't shy away from a fight. It's not a fight, Chris says. It's a conversation. She raises an eyebrow. A loud one. That's daytime, he replies. Big laugh from the audience. The producer's music cue starts playing softly underneath. Joy turns to camera. Chris rock, everyone. The applause rises, loud, sustained. Not just polite. People are reacting to what they just witnessed. Chris stands, shakes hands around the table. There's a brief moment where he and Joy exchange a look, not hostile, not friendly either. Just aware. As he walks off stage, some audience members are still clapping hard. Others are whispering to each other. You can see phones already out. And that's where the real aftermath begins. Within minutes of the segment airing, clips start circulating online. One clip in particular, when Chris says, I'm sorry it hurt you, but I'm not sorry I told it, starts trending. Some people are praising him for standing firm on free expression. Others are calling him dismissive. Joy's line, free expression doesn't mean freedom from consequences, gets clipped too. Supporters are posting it with captions about accountability and growth. The debate spills onto social media fast. Comment sections fill up. Hashtags start forming. Some viewers say it was refreshing to see a real debate without shouting. Others say it showed exactly why comedy needs more boundaries. By the afternoon, News outlets are picking it up. Tense exchange on daytime TV. Chris Rock pushes back. Joy Behar stands her ground. Behind the scenes, sources say the hosts talked about it during the commercial breaks. No yelling. No blow-up. Just strong disagreement. Chris reportedly left the building smiling. Not angry. Not fired up. Just steady. Joy addressed it briefly the next day, saying, "We can disagree and still respect each other." And that might be the real takeaway. No one stormed off. No one got cut off mid-sentence. It wasn't chaos. It was tension. Real tension. The kind that happens when two people with strong viewpoints refuse to water them down. Some viewers loved it. Some hated it. But almost everyone had an opinion. And that's where you come in. Was Chris right to stand firm on comedy being unrestricted? Was Joy right to push the idea of responsibility and impact? Did either of them go too far, or was this exactly what daytime TV needs more of? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Final Take Files for more real talk show stories.